In this lesson, we're going to learn how to use modifiers to model our objects. Alright, so we've seen a little bit on how modifiers can affect modeling for us. In the last lesson, we had talked about how to create this geometry out of splines, and we had to use a modifier to create that 3D geometry from those splines. But now, what happens if we want to make some more modifications to this object? Well, what I could do is I could come in and I could convert this to editable poly. Now, if I did this, you'll notice that it gives me lots and lots of topology here, a lot of geometry, and it's very, very smooth. However, I do not have access to those lines, so if I need to change the shape to this anymore, I'm unable to do that. And this is a destructive modeling method. Now, whenever you are modeling with modifiers, that's a non-destructive modeling method. So I'm going to hit Control-Z to get my editable spline and my surface back. Now, the great thing about using modifiers is that it's non-destructive. So I can add modifiers, and if I don't like the results, I can simply take them away without losing any work that I've done before. So I really like this shape, but I want to try a few things out. I want to go ahead and try to extrude out these corners and give them a little bit of a different shape. But I do not want to convert this over to editable poly. So what can I do? Well, let's go to our modifier list and let's take a look at some of these different modifiers that we have available to us. Well, if I want to be able to extrude these corners like an editable poly, I can actually use an edit poly modifier. Now, this adds the edit poly workflow to our object without actually destroying it and converting it down to an editable poly object. This is also great for showing us the topology of our smoothing in our object, and this can really help us troubleshoot some problem areas. Specifically, if we have some areas that are crossing in geometry and things like that, this will help us to decipher some of those issues, and we can adjust our spline accordingly. Alright, so now I want to come in and I want to select this geometry, okay, or these corners here, and I'm going to go ahead and hold down Alt and deselect what it created in the middle there, and I'm going to hit Grow, okay, and Grow, you can see that it grows out that selection, and then I can just simply come in here, hold down Alt, deselect anything there that I don't want. There we go. So now I have these corners selected, and you know what, let's go ahead and let's select all of those, and we'll come in here, we'll select all of these. Okay, and then I'm going to simply hit Grow, and we'll do that 3 times, and then I'm going to go ahead and deselect everything in the center. I just want those corners. Alright, so let's just make sure that's all we have selected. That looks good, and now I can come in here and I could use these edit poly tools. So I can extrude that out. I could go by local normal, and I could expand that. You'll see that that gives me kind of this edge, okay, this extrusion. And I can pull that out. Let's go to something like 0.008, and we'll hit OK. And then I could even go to edge mode and double click on those loops, and I could chamfer all of those. So I'm going to go ahead and double click on all of those. So hold Control, double click those edges all the way around. And then I'm going to use chamfer just to soften up those edges. So I'm going to bring that down to something kind of along these lines. Alright, so I can turn that off, and now I have my med box that I've created here and have used modifiers to model non-destructively. Now remember that whenever you're using this method, this does tend to make the file sizes a little bit larger because it has to store all of these different modifiers. You'll also have to remember that the order in which all the modifiers are stacked will change how the model is built. So for example, if I were to come in here and add in, let's say, a bend modifier, and I wanted to bend this and create kind of a different shape. Let's go along our y-axis or our x-axis, and let's change the angle and just kind of arcing this out to kind of something along these lines. And then I came in and I added in a taper modifier, and I take this amount down, okay, and it kind of creates this shape here. Let's use a different axis here. So let's take that taper amount. Okay, we did something kind of along these lines. If I took the taper and I clicked and held down on it and I dragged it underneath the bend, you'll see that we get this blue line. That's just going to reorder it, and you'll see that it changes the shape very slightly. Okay, so if I bring that back above, you see that we get a little bit of a change, and some are even more drastic than that. Now I could also right click and delete any one of these modifiers and get exactly what I was looking for before. So you can see just how flexible this method can be. Now let's go ahead and delete that bend off there, seeing how I don't necessarily want that. Let's put that back up against our wall. Alright, so we've gone ahead and we've talked about how to model using modifiers. And now in our next lesson, we're going to talk about how to create repeated shapes by building out our floor tiles.